Gauteng Departments of Community Safety and Education are hosting a school safety summit. It's aimed at tackling school break-ins, gangsterism, bullying and violence against pupils and teachers. Let's chat more about what's on the agenda. I'm joined this morning by Gauteng MEC for Community Safety, Sizakele Nkosi-Molobane. MEC, good morning. And thanks for your time. So this summit gets underway at 9 o'clock. It's happening in Benoni this morning. What's on the agenda? I mean, what are you going to be discussing, and who are the main role players who are going to be involved in these discussions?
Okay. The main role players are the principals, as well as the SGP and the student representatives. And the reason for us calling this summit, it was supposed to take place at the beginning of the year, because last year, just before the schools were closed, we saw an increase on violence, either by the students against other students, but also what shocked us was violence by students against the teachers. And I'm sure it shocked a lot of us in this society, in this community, that we then wanted to do something about it, in making sure that we bring it down, but also tackling the cause of this violence in schools.
Yes, I mean, you would have to wonder why, and especially when it comes to things like robberies, the random shootings that we've seen recently. Why is it that schools have now become the targets?
I mean, there are a number of reasons. Obviously, those that target the schools in order to steal, it's criminality. They just want to go there, steal whatever that is there in order to go and sell. But I think the problems of drugs in our schools, but also weak parenting from our parents, you know, because a number of students are just dumped in schools by parents, and parents expect that teachers, as well as government, must do everything that they're supposed to be doing at home. The issue of discipline. I mean, our children are supposed to be guided by us as parents, but other parents are scared of their own children, but they expect teachers and the police not to be scared of their offsprings. And I think this is what we need to deal with. And I think through the intervention that we are coming up with and the involvement of the parents, we will be able to deal with this problem. But the other problem is issues of drugs. You know, when we go to schools, I will make an example. We went to a school in Rivali, and randomly we tested about 46 boys and girls for drugs. All of those kids were positive. You know, either from Joanna, Nyaupe, and others. So you could just imagine if we tested the whole school, how many kids were going to be discovered that they're involved in drugs. And it's not only in Rivali. All the schools that we've gone to search them, you'll find that there's either a child that is selling drugs to others, but you'll also find kids carrying drugs that they use during breaks or in the morning.
Now, MEC, and I get what you're saying about bad parenting or parents who expect teachers to do their job for them, and we do have those. But what about others who are just not able to be there because they're working to provide? They leave before their children wake up. They come back when their children are sleeping. How do you plan to... Is there a plan, first of all, to maybe work the system in some way that teachers are equipped to maybe do a bit of a parenting job when it comes to that? And I understand that yours is community safety, but this extends, the link between home and school is such a big one, but that there has to be some sort of advice, some sort of safe place for kids in that classroom, and parents hold the key to being that safe. Teachers hold the key to being that safe place.
And that has been done by the Department of Education. In most of our schools, we have deployed social workers, where then when there are social problems, we need to make an intervention. But the Department of Education also came with a program to train parents, and those programs are during weekends, to train parents to be parents. Because and you remember that our parents are becoming younger and younger and younger because of parents of teenage pregnancy. Some of the kids that give birth to kids are not ready to be parents. Some of them, a child who will give birth at being 14 years, by the time the child is 17, that person is actually in his or her early 30s. So again, he's not actually ready to deal with a teenager, that with all the problems that teenagers come up with. And that is why the Department of Education introduced parenting skills to parents. But I can say to you now, those classes that were organized by the Department of Education, very few parents attended them. Out of 1,600 children, where we expect at least about 1,002 parents in that school, not even half have actually attended those classes. So it's actually a challenge, and I think it is time that parents don't actually outsource parenting to anybody. At least if you want to leave your child with someone that you trust.
Yeah.
Preferably a grandmother, an uncle, and a neighbor that is trustworthy, because some of the neighbors are not as trustworthy as supposed to be, including some of their relatives.
And when it comes to safety at our schools, in and around, and we've seen where schools have been targeted, there have been shootings, even though there's a police station right next door. That was just recently, just a couple of weeks ago. And we've heard the debate raging on about whether we have metal detectors, whether we have our kids walk through those systems when they walk into school. As community safety, what are you going to be looking at? What are you going to be discussing around that, so the knives, the guns, the weapons don't enter our schools to be used against other pupils and teachers as well?
I think the first thing that I want to say, we don't want to turn our schools into prisons. Yeah. You know, the things that we're doing in our homes, we can't do them in our schools, unfortunately. Our children are so used to high walls, burglar-proofed windows and doors, etc., etc. We can't do the same thing to our children, and that environment is not conducive for teaching and learning. We really need to make sure that the environment is as free as possible for our children to play as free as possible. We went to a school, myself and MEC for education, as well as the minister in Tshwane. That schools look like a prison. Despite it looking like a prison, there were a lot of break-ins. Those criminals are now breaking walls in those schools in order for them to access. And in this case, it's food that they're stealing.
Okay, so what's meant for pupils there? But do you think a one-day summit is going to be enough to address all of this? So what happens after today?
It's actually the beginning, because we hope that in this summit we'll then be taking resolutions and come up with programs that we'll have to implement in some of the schools. There are good stories to be told in schools in Soweto and in the West Rand. Those schools will be sharing their experiences on how they've dealt with the problems in their school. One school in Soweto, it took them less than 6 months to turn, because the situation there to something positive. Because the parents, first, the principal, the teachers, and the parents were willing to work together to solve the problems that were there. And that is what we are actually requesting and calling upon our parents to be willing to work with the schools.
And take an interest.
Yes, and take an interest in their own children's education.
Well, I wish you all the luck, and I'd be very interested to know what the outcomes and what the programs are after the summit. Thank you very much for your time. I know you do have to rush off to get to that part of the world.